Well, hello everybody and welcome to Chef's Baking Blog. Now, as it comes up towards Easter, today I'm going to be making a hot cross bun loaf. So I've made hot cross buns in the past, and I'm going to do basically the same recipe but in loaf form today. In fact, I'm going to do two, but I'll do the recipe for one and then show you the two as I progress. Now, traditionally hot cross buns might have currants in them and chopped mixed peel. Sometimes people put other things in them, and so for mine today I'm going to put a mixture of currants, sultanas, raisins and chopped up morello glacé cherries. That's just going to give a slightly different flavour. I'm also using allspice and cinnamon. Allspice is the more traditional spice, but some people use mixed spice instead, and then the cinnamon as well. So for the recipe I have 500 grams of strong white bread flour. I have 200 grams, that would be 4 cups. I have 200 grams of my fruit, which, as I said, is currants, raisins, sultanas and cherries, and I've got 50 grams of each in there. I have 50 grams of chopped mixed peel. I have I should go back and say this 200 grams works out at about 1.5 cups of dried fruit. The mixed peel is about 1/3 cup of mixed peel. I have 1 medium egg, which would be large in the USA. I have 75 grams of soft brown sugar, and that actually works out at 3/8 cup, so that's 1/4 cup and then another half of that quarter again. I have 40 grams of melted butter. I have the zest of a lemon. Now, I didn't have a fresh lemon, so I've used a powdered lemon zest, which works very well anyway. I have 2 teaspoons of allspice, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 10 grams, that's 1.5 sachets of easy bake or instant yeast. Then I have 300 millilitres of milk, which I have warmed up. So we'll get on and we'll start mixing all these things together. And I'm going to do this in my stand mixer, but you could, if you wanted to, do it all by hand. It's just that for kneading it's easier in a stand mixer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the flour into the mixer, and then I'm going to sprinkle in on top the allspice, the ground cinnamon, and then I'll put the salt on one side and I'll put the yeast on the other side, and the sugar can go in as well. And I'm just going to give that a mix together. And then I'll put the lemon in as well. That can be mixed in. And into that I'm going to pour our egg, half of the milk, or roughly half, and the melted butter, and I'm going to mix that until it all comes together into a dough. Now I should say that as you mix, you start on slow and then you can build up, and I will add more milk in as I need it, but I may not need all the milk. I want this to come into a silky smooth dough, and it will take about 8 to 10 minutes, I think. Okay, so our dough is now just slightly tacky, but it's nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that off into the bowl, and then I'm going to mix the fruit in. I've already combined the chopped peel with the rest of the fruit. Now I should say, if you don't like chopped peel, you could add something else in, like maybe 50 grams of cranberries or something like that, chopped up. So I'm going to put the fruit in, and again you could do this by hand, and I'm going to mix it until it's fairly evenly mixed into the dough. And that's okay. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of flour onto my work surface, and I'm going to tip the dough out onto the flour, so that I can just work it a little bit and shape it into a ball for proving. And this will give me a chance to check that the fruit's evenly spread. And with that mixed in like that, I'm actually going to put that into a greased bowl. I'll put it in face down to start with, then I'll turn it over, and that actually gets the whole dough greased so that it won't form a skin. And I'm going to cover that and leave it to rise for an hour and a half to 2 hours until it's doubled in size. Then I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, well, I'm back with you, and it's been an hour and a half and just over since I set our dough to prove. And while that was happening, I've also made a second amount of dough so I can make 2 loaves, because I want to show you different ways of finishing off. One's going to be in the loaf tin and one's going to be free form. So what we need to do is to take our dough, which as you can see has more than doubled in size. I'm going to tip that out onto the work surface, and I'm just going to knock that back to get the air out of it, and then I'm going to cut that, for this particular one, into 8 pieces. Of about equal size. And then with each one I'm going to roll it, to start off with, into a ball and just put it to the side. So that I can roughly measure the size of them. I'll actually weigh them as well, just so that I can try to get equal measures. Of course, the weights will be slightly different in as much as the quantity of fruit in each one is going to differ, and therefore the weight will differ slightly, but I want them to be reasonably standard in size. Okay, so I need to take some of this one, some of this one, so I think they're about the right size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll them into a sausage shape. for this particular loaf. And I have 8 sausages there, like that. And then what I have here is my 2-pound loaf tin, and I'm going to put the 8 into the tin 4x4, like that. Now if your tin is not a non-stick tin, you'll want to butter it, but this one should not stick. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover that one and allow it to prove until they've about doubled in size again. And for my second loaf, remember, I doubled my recipe to get 2 loaves, so if you follow the recipe, you'll just get the 1 loaf. I have my second amount of dough, and I'll tip that out. And knock that back as well. And I'm going to fold that in on itself, like that. And turn it over, just like that. Then have a parchment lined baking tray. I'm going to put my dough on that tray. I'm going to leave it like that, covered, so that that doubles in size as well. And that's going to take between an hour and an hour and a half. Now while that's doing, the time comes to an end, I'm going to preheat my oven to 200 Celsius. That's 180 Celsius with a fan, 400 Fahrenheit. And I'll also come back and we'll make a paste where we can put our crosses on the top. So I'll be back when these have doubled in size and my oven is preheated. Okay, so our dough has risen again in our loaf tin and on our baking tray. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a little bit of paste that are going to form crosses on the dough. So for that I have more than I need for 1 loaf, because I'm doing 2. But for 1 loaf you want 25 grams of flour, and into that you'll want to put 1 teaspoon of oil. I'm putting 2 in because I have double the amount, and up to 3 tablespoons of water, but put it in a bit at a time and start to mix until you have a paste which is thick enough to hold its shape, but that you can pipe, and you want it to be nice and smooth. So you may not need all of the 2 to 3 tablespoons of water that I mentioned in the recipe. I'm just going to put a little drop more water in mine. And that looks good enough to me. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into a piping bag, which I have here. And I won't need all of this, I'm sure, but it's best to be safe than sorry. And with that in the bag, I'm just going to cut the tip off, and I don't want a very large hole in this. And with that cut off, I'm just going to do a practice to see that it comes out. Yep. Okay, that will come out nicely. And then I want to form a cross on each of these logs. Like that. And on the larger loaf, I'm going to make a fatter cross. So I'm actually going to go over that twice. Like that. And that is all there is to it. So then I'm going to put those into the oven, which is preheating, and I'm going to bake them for 35 to 40 minutes. They should turn a nice golden brown on top, and if you tap the underside they should be hollow. If you have a thermometer like I have here, you can test the internal temperature of the dough, and it should be about 88 Celsius, that's 190 Fahrenheit. That would let you know that the dough inside is cooked. Then you can take the loaves out and put them onto a wire rack, which is what I will do, and I will then show you the results, because I will have some apricot jam which I've warmed slightly so that I can brush over the top to give a nice glossy sticky finish. So I'll be back when they've come out of the oven and we're ready to put the brushed jam on. So our loaves are out of the oven. They're still very hot, they've just come out of the oven. So the next thing to do is to take some apricot jam, which I did warm up, and I strained out any lumps, and just brush it all over the hot loaf. This will give it a nice sticky glaze. Which is traditional with hot cross buns. So that's our free-form one, and here's our one that we did in the loaf tin, and I'm just going to brush the top of these. And I cooked this for 40 minutes, and I actually tested with a thermometer, and it was registering at between 88 and 91 Celsius. So 88 is 190 Fahrenheit. So that means it should be cooked inside. So with the glaze on the top like that, I'm going to let those cool down completely, then I'll come back and we'll cut one and we'll have a taste. So I've let our loaf cool down a little bit, and I've cut one of them. I've cut the one which I did in the loaf tin, and I've put some butter on half of one slice. So let's have a little taste of it. I have that lovely spicy fruity flavour that you get with hot cross buns. It's very, very good, I have to say. And although it takes a bit of time, it's quite easy to make. And of course you can always, if you want to do the individual ones, you can use this recipe and just divide the dough into 12 and bake them for 30 minutes, and you'll have individual hot cross buns. So I can heartily recommend these. They taste wonderful. And that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, which will take you to this recipe, and I'll also put a link to it below the video. I will be back with you with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.